Welcome to episode 3 of Dr. A's Spiricast. We are very excited for our guest today. We have Kenn Edwards, a.k.a. Rune Walker. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. 1, 2, I just about jumped out of my chair because 3 is my number.
Wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's everyone else's number too sometimes, but like, yeah, even the price on the book has a meaning, right?
Exactly.
And everything comes down to 3 for me. So I'm glad to be 3. Thank you. Yay.
Awesome.
Welcome, number 3.
Yay.
All right. Kenn, tell us a little bit about your background, kind of your, we'll start at the beginning. What's your story? What was your upbringing? What led you here?
All right. I'm a native Utahn. I was born in Salt Lake. Only because that's where the hospital was. I'm from a small town called Stockton, Utah, which is
just outside of Tooele.
Yes, sir.
The fire that's still burning.
Yes.
Really?
Bower, right?
Yeah.
It's Bower.
Ooh.
It was an orchard, and actually, that mining town was the first town to have electric lights in the state of Utah.
Really?
Yeah, because it was the mining operation. Yeah.
Right. I mean, they just didn't like lanterns in there anymore? Yeah. I mean, they had to, but
Yeah.
Yeah, the fire still burning thing, that has always fascinated me. It's very nice.
Because it burns under.
Yeah.
Under
the ground.
Earth, it's just a big oven right now. It's just continual fuel being burned.
It's crazy because someone walked across it and fell in. Yeah, and their legs, this was years ago, but their legs got burned, yeah.
I see film script written all over this, but that will be a topic for another time.
You see film script, I saw a lawsuit, but
I mean, true.
Yes, the
Both?
answer is yes.
Yes to both. So I actually live in the house that my grandfather was born in, that my great grandparents lived in. My dad built a house about a block from there. I grew up there for the most part. I grew up, my parents were not active members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we lived right next door in a town of 300 people. So no matter what you did, you were involved with the church. But my parents sent us to church, I'm pretty sure, just to have a break. But
get out of the house, kids.
Yeah. It was their Sunday morning time, which now as an adult, I would crave to have time away from the kids like that. I don't have children for that reason, probably.
But you get it. You relate
so
now. Okay.
Get it. Yep. So I grew up in the church, and I grew up having this intense spiritual connection to that religion or that God, or having an intense connection to whatever spirit is, right? And however it was presented in that religion. I joke with people because they look at me with my tattoos and think it's kind of weird that how were you Mormon? And I tell them I was so Mormon. I had all of the names for my children written in my planner, my Franklin Day planner in high school, all 12 of them or whatever. And I also knew that if I stayed on that track, that there was no way that I wouldn't be in, the big quorum of the 70s.
Exactly.
It was very much, I knew that just on a base level, but life has other choices and opportunities. And so I pushed away sexuality, all of that stuff for my entire life. Like, there was no masturbation until I was 21. There was no alcohol. There was no nothing. So, right, when you ignore something that long, your body's going to take over and want it.
At some point.
Yes.
Biology says.
Yes. Yeah. If you're hungry, you can only go so long before you're going to try and eat something or drink something. And the same thing happens with your sexuality and your desire to feel those things. So it came to a point where, after trying to go on a mission twice and realizing that wasn't for me, coming home and at some point feeling like I had to choose between liking men or liking women. I very much envy the younger generations now who it doesn't matter, right? So I actually would have liked to have had that third option.
But
I felt like I was forced to choose, and everyone already knew, oh, you're gay. Oh, of course we knew that. We were just waiting for you to catch up.
Don't you love that?
Oh my God.
Like, thanks.
Yeah. Now it's like I would consider myself, I guess, omnisexual. But so I'm going through all of that, right? Like right around 21, 22.
That's a lot for that age too, all at once.
And I literally dropped to my knees and read my scriptures every time I felt any sort of sexual feeling. This happened for a couple of years, and finally I'm like, I'm going to go to the temple. I'm going to go through a session. I'm going to get into the celestial room, and I am going to pray, and I'm going to ask you dear baby Jesus and Heavenly Father, whatever, to give me a sign that this is, or take it away, take this away. And I sat there and sat there and sat there and
waiting for something, a sign.
Nothing. So I, in that moment, said, okay, I'm letting you know now that I need to step away from this. This is not going to work then, because my body tells me things that are different and requires different things than what you're providing. And so this isn't going to work. So I ended up stepping away from organized religion until, maybe 30, 31, 32, when I started to feel like, oh, maybe I should like Wiccan, which side tangent, I think everyone jumps to from Christianity.
That's typically the gateway.
Yeah.
That's the goat.
Yeah. So I picked up a book, I picked up tarot cards. They didn't make sense to me. And when I say they didn't make sense, I couldn't find the place in my body where that information was already stored.
Right.
So I couldn't find the connection. I couldn't find the genetic
DNA,
any
markers,
of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
None of it.
The call,
all of it.
Polling. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was fascinating because I didn't want to do what I had done before, which was follow blindly and not really have any, say maybe in things. And that didn't work. So knew from a very young age that nature was always part of it. I would go to church and then my dad and I would get in the truck and go for a ride in the mountains or go for a ride out into the West Desert. So that became church for me as well. And the point where it was like, this is where I feel connected. This is where I feel alive. Mm-hmm. And I'm using words that are words we would use today, but I didn't know how to describe that
exactly.
as a kid, right? I didn't know.
You felt something. You felt a calling or like a pull, like I was saying. Yeah.
Yes. So feeling something, period. Like you were feeling something because I had felt the Holy Ghost and the gift of the Holy Ghost and all of that jazz. And it was nice and lovely. And later on down the road, I would figure out that I needed to give back the gift of the Holy Ghost because I see it as like having an earpiece, which is, I think, why sometimes people have conflicting opinions, one in their head, one in their gut, and then also the one in their ear. That's the Holy Ghost, right? Even if you leave the church, unless you give it back, you can still have some challenges. So now, feeling something more connected to nature, it was great. I ended up moving to Portland, Oregon. One day I walked into the New Renaissance bookstore, which was two of these beautiful Victorian homes connected together with books and all kinds. And it was more spirituality that, of course, I was looking for. And they had readers and diviners who would work there from time to time. And
my kind of place. I'd go have some tea and
It's amazing. Yeah. It was just cool. Like one of those things that maybe is quintessential Portland or...
Right.
I thought there was one that was like on 2nd South and 3rd East or something around there. It was like an old house that was a bookstore as well, but it was like one story. It would be like a pot farm now, home in Portland.
Yeah. Everything's different there.
Oh, it is. It's the 90s. It's still the 90s there.
I miss it a little bit. So that day I walked up the stairs, just had moved there. I didn't really have money for a reading, peeked into the room, and Ingrid Kincaid, still a friend of mine, big, white, curly hair. Gosh, maybe at that point, 60, 65, probably 60. She looked at me and she said, come in. I said, I'm sorry, I don't have money. And she goes, that's okay, come in. So she sat down, we were just talking, and she pulled out the runes and had them out. And I just knew them. I recognized the symbol. I recognized the energetic symbol. I recognized it activated something in my body.
A knowing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. That's kind of where all of that began. Studied with her for a while, moved back here, opened up Blue Antler, which was a metaphysical store in Twilla. And then kind of ever since then, we sold it in 2019, right before COVID, right when I began to work it with the Northern Traditions Shamanism Guild. And then, so now it just kind of has grown and expanded since then to where I'm at today.
That's beautiful. So this was the moment where something just ignited within you with those runes.
Yes.
And you've taken that, right? You've taken that now and are now using them as tools for shamanic practices and readings. Tell us how that all transpired.
So the runes really historically don't have much of let me start here. I work in a tradition of the Northern traditions, which is Anglo-Saxon and Norse, which is a broken lineage because it was very oral, an oral tradition passed down that way. So as people converted to Christianity over the first millennia, it was lost.
Right. And even the poetic Eddas were written by a monk, correct?
They were recorded by him, and that was, I believe, in Iceland. And so Iceland converted in 1000 CE. So they're the closest thing we have to it being something that was lived. So one of the challenges in that is that we have this like beautiful quilt that your grandmother had at the bottom of her cedar chest, but unfortunately there were moths in there. And so you pick it up and you look at it and there are holes.
Right.
So
great analogy there.
So how do you go back and weave in and connect in or add in new fabric and tie in? It's a whole restoration thing, and you can do it, but it takes a lot.
And there will be new patches and new squares that you're filling in as part of that knowing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the runes never were really used as divination until quite recently, what we would consider quite recent. But the one thing that I always connected to with the runes was that one of the stories Odin talks about watching the Nornir, who are similar to the Fates, using them and carving them into the tree, the Great World Tree, to make things happen. So he saw them as a way to manifest or magic. They're magic. So using them in that way, they were sacred symbols with meaning within magic. And most recently, they're kind of passed down as an alphabet, which, I'm grateful that they were kept even in that way, because at least we have them. There are many varieties. There's Anglo-Saxon, there's the Elder Futhark, the Younger Futhark, and Gothic, Frisian, Northumbrian, like there's different names for them. But because they all came out of the Germanic peoples, as they moved about Northern Europe, they changed. And so some of them have different numbers, some of them have different meanings, which I find interesting,
very
fascinating.
Yeah.
And so my connection to the Northern traditions has always been through the runes. And so me connecting with the deities, the stories, the sagas, the Eddas, connecting into that came after my connection to the runes and my beginning studying them. And you can't really study them. It would be like trying to understand Om outside of the context of the culture that it came out of.
Right.
So when you're looking at these things, you're looking at, okay, well, the runes came out of the void as Odin brought them. And now today we could look at it as a shamanic journey, going into the other world, bringing knowledge back, a hero's journey, if we talk about it in certain other cultures and contexts. You begin to learn, I connected to the gods and to the culture as much as I could through the runes. And so that's kind of the place I hold, and I hold on to that very tightly. In my book that came out, I guess, a couple of years ago, on the very back of it, I made it a point of putting the runes are wisdom for living and the runes are living wisdom. So the idea there is that getting to know, it was very hard to live in Northern Europe. As one historian puts it, the worst real estate you could have, because there's not a lot of flat land to grow food.
Right.
It was colder, it was darker, it was not great. So the runes hold such wisdom about how to survive that we need the knowledge to do that. I don't think it's lost. I think that they've still been around just as much as humanity has. And so you go into them all, the Norse deities are there, right? Like Freya, Victoria's Secret.
Oh, yeah, she's
Thor
hot.
or Loki might be GameStop or some of those.
Spencer's.
Yeah. Yes, for Loki. Yeah. So we still have
Who would
those
Frigga
concepts.
be, or Frigg?
She might be one of the home stores, like
Oh, you're right. Home and Hearth.
Yeah. Yes. So any of those stores would be that. I think the runes are super applicable, and I teach from them, even if I'm not teaching about them, even if I'm not writing about them. I ask them, hey, what should I talk about? What do you want me to talk about? Like, you don't live within linear time. I do. You can look forward to say, I'm going to be writing this article, or I'm going to be presenting here. Tell me what we're presenting about so that it's applicable to those people. And that has worked out brilliantly every time. So using that wisdom, you don't have to be part of the Northern traditions, I don't firmly believe, to access that information about how to live in this world. Even though we're not in Northern Europe at the moment, the concepts are still the same. Community, balanced reciprocity, what do you value, sacrifice.
Yeah, that was, nods. We got, the community.
Yeah, all of that. So it's just, that was my kind of connection in 2019. 2019, I think, is when I started filling out my application for the Shamanism Guild. And I believe I applied for it right before my mom died in 2020.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Her funeral was the weekend before lockdown. So
Oh, wow.
there are a whole bunch of theories. I have theories about what she died from, now that we know what all that looked like.
Exactly.
So that happened in March. I moved back here because I had just moved to Oregon again. Moved back here to help live with my dad, help him transition through this. And when you tend to step into shamanic space in any tradition or any culture, sometimes you don't survive. And I heard it described beautifully by an indigenous woman saying that just because you're genetically predisposed to be a shaman doesn't mean you'll survive the shamanic tests.
Truth.
Or the shaman sickness.
Little deaths and sickness. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fascinating that I applied. My mom passed away. I got accepted. I was diagnosed with cancer that fall, had 20% of my tongue removed. A couple months later, my dad was diagnosed with melanoma. Kind of like everything just began to fall apart, which was necessary because that container would not hold the life that I was about to have and that I do now. And we continue to have to switch out the containers, right? You can't plant a seed in the spring and leave it in the little tiny start. You have to keep putting it into a bigger container every time until you put it out. So that's exactly how this kind of works, I think, for most of us in that realm. Yeah, and now I took my initiation year and a half, 2 years ago. Time is weird now. Time flies. And so now we consider that a winged shaman. So someone who's actually gone through the initiation.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So now I just I help run that as well as do things around here in Northern. That is actually based back east, but we have students everywhere. Now I'm of service here in Northern Utah and a couple other places and work out of the Conjuring Tree and Another Man's Treasures.
Oh, I love the Conjuring Tree.
I love
They're
those guys.
Fantastic guys.
Yeah. So yeah, now I do divination sessions. I do a free meditation twice a month at the Conjuring Tree for people. They just need to sign up so that you can have a reserved space. It's not unlimited space. Teach classes there. Do things with Utah Pagan Market. I'll be there at the Beltane Festival. I'm going to be speaking and doing one of the rituals this year.
Yay.
Yeah. So
That's the big one. That's one of the big ones.
that's the big, well, everyone loves to dance around the maple.
Yes.
Yeah. We're going to circle that back around to the whole sexual thing that we started with. Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yep.
Right.
Down this journey. Let's go.
Yep. It's all about the little deaths,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's a French term, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I read about that in your book too.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. I love the book, by the way.
Thank you.
It's very digestible. For those of you who are not familiar with Kenn's work, the name of the book, it's called Runes, Experience and Gnosis of a Modern Rune Walker. It was very good. It's one of those reads where you can pick it up and put it back down, pick it back up. Very digestible in chunks and just very, very good to read. Very easy to read as well. So
Thank you.
I enjoyed it a lot.
Thank you.
Even having already known quite a bit about the runes, I learned so much more
Thank you.
with your book. So
Oh,
thank you.
I'm glad. Thank you. It took me about 5 or 6 years to get it done. I think one of the things that I struggled with in putting this together was always feeling like I needed to have justification. I needed to have the bibliography. I needed to have all of that shit. And then I realized I'm like, that's been done.
It came from your heart.
Yeah.
You have stories that you use to tie together to each rune and its meaning. And I think that's more powerful.
Thank you. And it's part of the conversation, right? Like there in Heathenry, which I know plays into all of this, there are certain different types of heathenry. One could be considered Reconstructionist, several. So like we're going to do it just how it's written by the monk, by the way, right? You brought that up. Thank you. Or
Story.
Strulison.
Yep.
Strulson.
Yep. My memory works sometimes.
All the time.
Yeah. Well, mine doesn't anymore, but I'm glad yours does because as a team, we'll get through this.
We will. The team.
Yeah.
Boom.
Boom. It's one of those things where the idea of bringing any type of spirituality, which I want to come back to that term in a minute, into modern use that was an oral tradition that has been lost. There are so many. I see it, and I'm very grateful for this illustration in my brain. I believe it came from Rune Jarno Rasmussen, who's the Nordic animist.
Mm-hmm.
He speaks about these things being in a dialogue. We're having a dialogue with the past. We're having a dialogue. And so I kind of saw it as a giant table with everybody, not everybody, but everybody's having a conversation together. And one of the things that I really found missing was a book that was strictly about stories about how they apply today. And that took me a long time to get to.
Yeah.
But that's what it is now. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, throw it in APA format and, throw citations in there. I do that with my eyes closed, but this for me felt so much more personal and really resonated with me.
Thank you.
So I think it will resonate with other people as well.
Even in the book, I talk about like a little fuckery here and there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they're not in the order that they would traditionally be ordered. I pulled runes, and as I pulled them, that was the order in which they were going to be spoken about in the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of let them have their say.
That's another thing too, is that it has subtle hints of comedic undertones in there as well. So I appreciated that.
I think I'm funny. And so just like every other middle-aged white man, we think we're funny. Yeah.
Just ask my kids.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. So going back to heathenry, just for people who maybe are not as familiar with the tradition, can you talk a little bit about Yggdrasil and the 9 realms and everything? Just kind of give people an intro to what the system is.
Yeah, sure. Also, when I use the term heathen or heathenry, that can be a controversial term modernly because it has in the past tended to be adopted by white supremacists, all that kind of thing.
Right.
And that is not me. That is not anything I wish to be associated with. I don't think it's right. I chose to take that tattooed on me as a reference to what the term pagan means, but in Northern Europe. So pagan or pagano, person of the country. Heathen is someone from the heath, and heath is defined as the uncultivated land. So someone who's not agrarian, not agriculture, they live on the land, they have connection with the land. I adopted that. There will be some people who consider themselves Norse pagan or Anglo-Saxon pagan. Mm-hmm. I just tend to use the word heathen because I feel like it's important for us to reintroduce words that have root in Germanic or Northern languages, because we could be missing the language. We could be missing meaning by leaving out those words. In this tradition, if we're looking at Norse or Anglo-Saxon, what we're looking at is the idea that we came from fire and ice. There was a gigantic void in which 2 worlds, one of mist and ice and one of fire, existed. As they came closer together, the fire began to melt the ice. When the ice melted, a being came out of that, Ymir. So Ymir is the first being that the giants came out of. Literally, some of the stories talk about his legs rubbed together and that made a giant, came out of his armpits. So maybe Snorri got that. I don't know. It's like the idea that fire and ice being in Northern Europe is very real.
Especially in Iceland. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fire and ice.
Yes.
Where did those concepts come from?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And which I can derail quite easily, but I will for just a moment, and then we'll come back, I promise.
Love it.
It's all location specific. So how do you live a tradition? I'm going to even say Christianity. How do you live a tradition that's a desert religion? We're close to a desert here, but not the desert that it came from.
No.
How do I live a Northern traditions way of living that is so location specific? We have the mountains, we have water, we have those. It's similar, but we're going to have to use some of our own personal gnosis, UPG, which is talked about in the book. Mm-hmm.
What does UPG mean again, the acronym?
Unverifiable personal gnosis. But now we've tended to start using also the term PCPG, peer corroborated personal gnosis. Mm-hmm. And a lot of us are solo practitioners because the minute you say Norse or kindred or Viking, people go weird. And that's can be a whole challenge in of itself. So those of us who are solo practitioners tend to, and we believe that we can be communicated with. and communicate to the deities and spirits, we begin to write down our experiences. And so when you have 3 or 4 people come together that have the same experience, that's pure corroborated personal gnosis. So we're filling in the holes of the quilt, right?
Yes.
We're bringing in these new things that are not just something that I think or I saw, but something someone else experienced who has some sort of gifts as well. Back to the story. So then the cow, who came out of nowhere, is licking salt and releases a being from them, one of the Aesir, the Aesir, the sky gods. And then they begin to intermix with the giants, and it's patricidal. Odin and his brothers end up killing Ymir, using his body to make the mountains and the rivers and the sky and all this, right? Then they begin to organize the 9 worlds. In some tradition, in some writings or historical references, there are only 7, but again, it's oral and we don't.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you have Midgard, which is kind of where we live, the Middle Earth.
Middle Earth.
If you're a Tolkien.
I was just going to say a lot of his concepts, including the different kinds of species of humans, came directly from Norse traditions.
Absolutely.
Including, we can get into all kinds of things with the trees and the Jorgmunder and snakes and all kinds of.
Absolutely. It's
I wrote a whole paper on it in college.
So
interesting.
It's so interesting because he did pull a lot of that from there. And he also, one of the challenges that we have is that, for instance, I sat down with a young man at one of my book signings, and he starts telling me the story about how he connected with Thor and how he connected with this. And as he's telling me the story about why he's connecting with him, I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from. And then he begins to tell me about the Marvel movies. And I stopped him and I said, okay, I need you.
Chris Hemsworth? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm like, I mean, no one's gonna kick that out of
Natalie Portman.
Come on. It's all very sexy, right? Even Hela is very Kate Blanchett's
very sexy
in the end, right? So that's one of our challenges, right? Is that we have this infusion of storytelling of these stories from the perspective, again, of Christianity. And also the perspective of Western society, where potentially the effect of hero and villain in our spirituality, our belief systems, and our culture. At what point did our stories around the campfire turn from us just telling about our day to us having to have a villain to make us?
Right.
And so
life was getting too good.
We had too much time. It's interesting, right? So when you begin to look back at the stories, Odin hung on Yggdrasil
for 9 days, was it?
Yep. And so did Jesus.
Yep.
Right.
A lot of commonalities there.
Which came first? And did they actually both happen, or was there an influence there? We don't know. We have no idea. So going back to the story, Yggdrasil, speaking of, is the tree that holds all of the 9 worlds. Now, it's talked about and often exemplified in artwork as a tree with worlds in the roots, at the middle, and in the branches. I love the imagery. What I don't love about that is that we're now getting into the concepts of hierarchy. And that I think is problematic because it is modern or can be modern interpretation of how structure should be. I think the structure for those societies was not as hierarchical as this makes it look, because it also then puts the high gods, the sky gods at the top, which if we're looking at other traditions like Celtic, of course you have land, sea, and sky. Well, of course the sky gods are up here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a hierarchy, but that's the only thing we know is what we can see from a ladder.
Or with Roman and Greek, you've got the gods and demigods.
Yes, exactly. I encourage people to think it through and to even put on your little sniffer of certain concepts: patriarchy, hierarchy, Christianity, good and evil, binary. First of all, binary period. And start, as you're reading through these things and feeling through them, just know that those things are there because we're still engaging with it in those ways. But they might not have been there from the beginning, right? So we have the tree, which holds all the worlds. It's a way that we can travel between them. Odin travels between them on his 8-legged steed.
I love Sleipnir. He's dope. He's the 8-legged horse that Odin rides on, by the way.
And who's his mom?
Yes, I slightly remember that.
Yep, Loki.
Oh, Loki.
Again, non-binary, gender bending. Bring it on. Any day of the week. What I find fascinating, right, is that the drum is the shaman's horse. I've yet to sit down and try to even imagine what an 8-legged horse sounds like running. But I feel like
thought about that before.
I feel like there's something in there that speaks to the rhythm of that being the rhythm that creates trance and allows you to journey.
Right. Putting you into that alpha state, into when you think about binaural beats, that's very true.
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, drums are one of the main instruments for meditation.
When I was
Like
part
the
of
drum circles,
Oh,
you get a drum circle of like 20 or 30 people, and you see all these people sync together. Starts out kind of rogue, and then but over time, all of a sudden it's like, and you're just like, whoa. And you realize that they all fall in, and it's about the rate of a heartbeat most of the time. Then you're immersed into that whole thing, just the waves going right through you. It's pretty neat.
When I was a part of a kindred, one of the things that we would do is we would imbibe in some Valerian tea or something to that extent. And, with the drums and everything, it would bring us the connection to Odin. Mm-hmm. If we did dream about him or if we did feel him, then that was really, really special. So very interesting.
That's cool.
Yeah. It's when I do the meditations at the Conjuring Tree on the first and third Saturday of the month, I begin with walking people through like a body scan, calming down, connecting with breath, which is Odin again, right? Mm-hmm. And then for about 20 minutes, I'll just drum and let them journey or whatever they want to do in that space. And so people do enjoy the space you can get to with that. There are 8 or 9 paths to altered states, and drum is one of them. And drum is the one combination of drum and breath is usually my combo, but it's fascinating. And they appear in almost every culture. And even in the Sami people, which don't really have, there's a couple of influences into Scandinavian languages and culture from them, but they pretty much kept it separate. But even when their culture began to be threatened, they recorded all of their history on their drums. They took the drums apart, rolled up the skins and buried them so that they wouldn't lose their history. Yeah, it's it's really nice. Yeah, it's beautiful. I wish I had that.
Let's go digging, folks.
Right? Yeah.
Let's go create some time capsules. Yeah.
So I see the tree as being the cables between the computers in your intra-office system. So I can go between any of the computers as long as we're connected to the tree. And that's kind of a simple way to put it, but that's how I engage with it. Also engage with it as its own entity, but it's never spoken about in those terms. And that's my experience.
I had a dream once of deity showing me the different realms in the universes, and it was very much like microchips and different connections. Remember? I was like, I just had the most magnificent dream, and I was shown how the world is set up and everything. So I resonate with that very much so.
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah.
Even like galaxies could be the connectors of the branches of the tree. I'm thinking Christmas trees, guys, the top being the sun in the solar system and the different ornaments being planetary bodies and kind of the tinsel, those connectors.
Yeah.
Right?
I was just going to say, when you were talking about that tree, I had that nightmare going up to the side of Mount Olympus, and we pull up and this tree just growing. It was really backwards, but it was this really weird old ancient tree. And then all of a sudden, as I walked by it goes, "The baby's yours." But it was this haunting female, "This baby's yours." And I was like, time to go. I'm like, and this is in my dream. And then, what was it? It was like, "She's all yours," or something. "She's your baby," something like that. And I was like, nope, it sure is not. And I was like, we're out of here. And I woke up and I was talking
in your sleep.
Oh, because I was like, nope.
Sounds like you need a reading from Kenn here.
I was going to say, because it was a really weird looking tree growing out of the side of the mountain, and it had snow underneath, but then it was desert around it, like dirt. It would have been the other way around. If the snow fell, there would be ground, but it was reversed. And then it was more like a baobab tree. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
It doesn't have the leaves. They're just
so ancient, maybe in a different region.
Ancient tree with a female haunting disembodied voice. voice telling me that it's my baby. And I'm like, I don't think so.
Interesting.
It's really weird. And when I looked it up, it was like the baby is like something I'm working on. So it would have been like this radio station,
like
or
a
something.
project.
Or something like that. Because I'm like, there is no way there is.
Okay,
like
for
that.
everyone
Anyway,
who is listening, I hear a bag coming out.
It's
I'm very excited about this.
It's my room bag.
Yes, it's your room. Yep, there you go. Shake it.
Boy.
Yep. These are actually, we're going to pull on that if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah,
Can we?
absolutely.
So the interesting.
I'm interested. It's bothered me ever since because I'm like, what?
Yeah.
It really has. He made a post about it. He brought it up on the radio station.
It really haunted me because it was just a disembodied voice, but it was female and it was like just through me. And I was like, nope, it sure is not. And I was like, no. And she heard me. I don't know. Because I laughed at the end because I was like, nope, there's no way.
And he was kind of sleep talking, but it was more like a,
I sounded like a ghost.
He sounded like the ghost.
Yeah. It was so funny.
And that's what I woke
remember
up to.
waking up to that and laughing.
Like,
She's
are
like,
you
are you
okay?
okay? And I was like, oh my God, nope. That's
Not
literally
okay.
what I was doing. I was just like, no. It was just haunting female voice.
And you're
This is
going
your
through
baby.
so many changes right now.
Yeah,
too, with your dad
lost my dad, all these
passing
things, and then
Rocco passing.
yeah, and
just oh my gosh,
Everything
just kind of piled up, and then thinking about all my friends I lost throughout the year, and I'm like, God, am I next? And so, of course, I actually had another dream just recently where I died, and she was doing all the paperwork for me so I could get on up into the universe.
I have
Wow.
So we'll bring this up in other episodes too, but I have discovered a gift that I have with creatures and people that are passing.
like a psychopomp.
Yes.
Yep, love it.
But
Yes.
anyway, so that's the weirdness of what I had.
We'll
the
get
last
into
couple of
that
days.
later.
Yeah,
We'll have an episode about this weird one right here.
Yeah, I was thinking
The
about
Dr.
that.
A.
Yeah.
We'll get there.
I'll interview you.
I'll do ya.
Well,
That's a whole other podcast.
that is a whole other podcast.
Okay. When I read, also, if I pull them out of the bag, they're meant to be out of the bag. So when I drop them, if they're face down, they end up being like undercurrents or major big picture stuff. These are all face up. So we've got Ansu's, which is clearing; Year, which is mastery, leveling up; Soilo, which is enlightenment or victory. Then you also have, what's fascinating about this is that cult shows up sometimes when the Norns are involved with things. I'm representing them, but also represents like a sacred quest. So,
Or Holy Grail, right?
yeah,
Or
yes,
something like that.
yes. So
You're on a spiritual quest.
Yep. What I think is interesting about this is that you're clearing things that you adopted as goals. You adopted them because people said, this is what success looks like. This is what you should do. You're very good at this. You should do this. And even though you were very good at it, you didn't need to do it in a way that proved it, or you didn't need to prove that you were good at it. There were a lot of things that are about pleasing other people in this situation. And so what I find really interesting about this is that you specifically said, no, this is not mine, and you walked away. And I think that's a very good mantra for you moving forward, because what we're looking at is
kind of going there now. Telling people, that's where I'm at. I'm like telling people no. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
And if they get upset with that, I'm like, hey, I'm in a situation now where I can, so it's mine.
Well, and there's what I love about saying no is that we end up with giant betrayal, other people feeling betrayed. And there's nothing we can do about that necessarily. And it's not ours to own. And we just have to get used to being the bad guy or people speaking badly of us because they're no longer getting what they want from us. That's a whole other manas community. How does that work? And when you do step into your unencumbered, wild, whole self, you will, and you do have to say them that way because you can't lie anymore. You can't fake it. You can't do any of that shit anymore. You just have to do you. And I wouldn't be surprised, also looking at these runes on the table, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of education. Like I want to go back to school for this, or I need to do this, which is very appropriate.
I'm actually going through that too with the business.
Yep.
I'm like,
Yep.
I'm just filling out, okay, I got to start getting people's applications in and start building this up from scratch.
Yeah.
Though I've had 16 years of experience experience behind it. I'm starting over again. So, and there's a lot of new things that I got to pick up.
This is a good way to put that. That year is a rune of the archer, connected to Scotty, a giantess who lives in the north, in the snow, prefers it there, loves it there. It's much harder to hunt. It's much harder to stay quiet. It's much harder to stay untrackable.
Doesn't she have white wolves?
I think so, yes. And
I love her.
And she also got fucked over by the gods, which bless her for making it through that.
Yeah.
So she's an archer. It's a rune of the archer. But for 16 years, you've been shooting the bow. Now, what is being required is that you learn what tree to harvest the wood from, how to harvest the wood, how to make the bow, how to make the string or the sinew, how to make the arrow, how to make the flint on the end, how to shoot that bow and arrow, kill with one shot in every possible wind, sun scenario, and not waste a single bit of the kill. Because you can't. We're not allowed to. They didn't. They used everything.
Yep.
So in this instance, it's now moving from I know how to shoot a bow and arrow to I know the bow and arrow. And that's the shift too in perspective and also in the part that you're playing. Now that you've really found this beautiful enlightenment aspect, which is also you now becoming the lightning rod instead of chasing the lightning.
Profound.
Right? Like that's kind of where I'm at.
That's exactly where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah. That's crazy.
It's a different place.
Oh, it really is. Yeah.
And think
where I'm at now is a really different place than I was 2 months ago.
Trying not to fall back on our old patterns of thought and how we did things is a challenge every day. Because there's no way you can build this. There's no way you can know the bow and the arrow and the kill if you're only interacting with it from, I can shoot the bow and arrow. That's it. There's no way you can do it. Your life will not work. Yep.
Facts.
Thank you so much.
That was nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me do that. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
I wasn't expecting a taste of what you do. I mean, I've heard of you. I've seen you around, but this is very enlightening. Or in your case, would it be darkening? Let's talk about that. Yes.
So can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What did you think when you read that chapter? What did you actually? I don't want to know what you thought. I want to know what you felt when you read that chapter.
So as a whole, I feel like the term enlightenment, to me personally, it reminded me that usually that implies that something outside of yourself called to you, or you had some kind of epiphany with the aid of an outside source. When I heard in darkening and when I started to read that chapter, I was reminded that a lot of times that gnosis or that knowledge comes from within. So the divine coming from within.
Yeah.
So that's what was my biggest takeaway.
Nice. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Going back to the back of the book that says the runes are wisdom for living and they are living wisdom. Enlightenment, higher self, all of these terms that even if they don't mean outside of me, they do. We say them, and there's now, and I can't speak for everyone, but I know that there's some implied level of my higher self is outside of me. My higher self is not in my physical body. My physical body is evil. My physical body has urges, and that's what I'm here to overcome. I think it's very important to know what your worldview is. I was speaking to somebody about the gene keys. If you've heard of them, it has to do with a little bit of like human design. They kind of come from the same place, but it's based in Eastern philosophies. So when I asked the person, oh, this makes sense that you speak about it this way because all life is suffering and you have to suffer. And they kind of looked at me blankly, and I was like, well, that's if you don't know where, I didn't mean to be rude, but I was like, you need to know what that person's worldview is, or what the context of where that is coming from. So in terms of all of that, like overcoming the body, overcoming the urges, overcoming and mastering that to be able to reach a higher plane of understanding and existence, I was really fucking annoyed with the word enlightenment. And I was really at that point having my rebellious phase against anything in the New Age spiritual community, because it was all about high vibe and then what's a low vibe. And that's all. This is sounding very binary for me.
Was that the 80s?
I wish.
I know, right?
I wish.
Love and light.
Yeah. Yes. And all of that is very important. We just can't go so heavy on it, right? So in my worldview, and how my psychic gifts work, is that my body is the tool that translates the energy. So if I ignore my body and think that the only thing that is worth doing is enlightenment, which is out there, or listening to my higher self, the visual that can instill is not one of a complete whole being in my physical body. So I came up with the term endarkenment, meaning that if you come across some knowledge from a book or from a speaking or from an experience I had in a dream, endarkenment is pulling that energy of that, whatever that knowledge is, into my body and seeing if it finds somewhere that it already exists. So the genetic DNA we talked about earlier, the connection there, or I also think of things in terms of my center of knowing being my logic, my brain, my emotion, my heart in that area, and then my instinct, which sits in my lower gut. So pulling that knowledge into one of those other two, the emotion or the instinct, and seeing how those two parts of me, which are more physical, can react to that. And they're also less, our brains are so susceptible to outside influence that pulling it down into the other two centers of knowing is essential. You have to know what a yes feels like or an affirmation in your instinct, not just when it's painful because I should have trusted my gut. I had a pain in my gut that told me not to do that. Mm-hmm. Well, but what does it feel like when it's a yes, So I love that concept of just like, I've found my nice medium place with enlightenment and endarkenment. But yeah, still incorporating the body into this experience and not just trying to escape it.
Does endarkenment, and I don't know if I saw this in there, but does it also involve maybe shadow work or something that is maybe unconscious sometimes?
Yes. I don't know that I would call it shadow work. I think I would call it the unconscious being the parts of my body and my deeper knowing that are being repressed. Now, I will say that I've yet to meet a rune that didn't force me to do some sort of work, shadow work. Like, they're very good at calling me out.
Mic drop on
Yeah. It really is. It's like, oh, so you want community, but like, if we look at manas looks like two wunyos put together. So you have a wunyo, meaning the rune of joy, and I use it as alignment too. You can't feel joy unless everything's aligned. So if you have two beings, two wunyos that come together and they're full and complete in and of themselves to make a third thing, that pulls us out of you complete me mentality, right? It also puts us into you have to be willing to give as much as you get, and how to form community. And for somebody who, speaking of myself, my youngest sister died when I was 4, and our family kind of fell apart. I now know and realize that my parents did the best they could.
Right.
They didn't do anything wrong, but they were barely holding it together and getting by themselves. So I have a giant, it's getting smaller, place where I don't trust people and I'd rather do it myself. That doesn't build community, and that is absolutely against the philosophy or the concepts exemplified in the runes. So they are constantly asking me to change, or they're constantly challenging the way I think. And I think that's where it doesn't matter what your spirituality, philosophy, whatever, the runes can be very helpful in just asking you the questions like, how do you value yourself? What do you value? How do you value yourself as a sexual being? How do you value your own sexuality? Are you a hoarder? Right? Which earlier I spoke about eliminating that by getting a small car so I can't hoard. But there are things you can do. That's why I think the wisdom can be universal.
Right.
Because they're asking us to deprogram ourselves to a point where life is about living in and with where we're at, not having dominion over, which is the book that most of us have learned from and our society is kind of based on.
Thank you so much. And I would like to point out too that even in my history and structure of the language course that I took at Westminster University back in about 2011, I want to say it was towards the end of my degree, the Western tradition starts with runes. So that's really where we start the written language. So I love the story of Odin bringing those back as a gift to humanity. So,
and thank you for, that was not a fact I knew about that's where that started.
In the Western tradition.
In the Western tradition,
yep. Eastern, it was cuneiform.
Yep. What's interesting to me is depending on who you speak to, Odin may have raped them out of the void. Did he reach into the void and pull them out? Were they willing? You know, do you see where I'm going? Like, it depends on, that came from a woman who had been very suppressed in her life by, you know, white male shit in our culture. So also, what lenses am I looking at this through? I now look at it as and we are seeing what they would have used as a process for shamanic journey. Depending on where you're looking at it from, it could be a complete rape or a complete enlightening,
or even some kind of mistranslation.
Yep.
Because again, the books were written by the victors, right? So there is that to take into consideration.
And the fact that they're not linear. Those stories, we joke all the time that Tyr has a hand and he doesn't all the time because it got bitten off by Fenrir the wolf, but he still has it. Like, because they're not linear, it's an interesting way to try and wrap your head around how these oral stories survived and lived within those nonlinear aspects.
The series Dark comes to mind.
One of my all-time favorites.
Speaking of nonlinear. Well, I absolutely loved this. Thank you so much. And please tell me you're working on another book.
So my next book comes out. We're doing a launch party on March 29th at the Conjuring Tree.
Yay!
Yeah, thank you. The book is called...
I need to go check out the bigger store since they moved. I
it's
have not had a
amazing.
chance yet. I'm so excited.
Please do. It's amazing. My next book, though, is called Get Your Shit Together 101. It came out of... I sat down with a friend he called me and said, listen, I think my wife is leaving me. I think we're getting divorced. I don't know what to do. I'm kind of losing my shit. I've still got to work today. So I went over, took him through, a meditation, calmed him down. And as I left, I thought to myself, I'm like, this book is written. And I had it written in a little bit different format. But every time I work with clients who it's gotten so bad that they can't control anything, my first question is, what are your boundaries like with people? And they're like, well, I don't have them. I'm like, okay, start there. But
boundaries?
What are those? So Get Your Shit Together 101. It's a very small book. It's simple. It's about, and it's not only for developing a spiritual practice, but like just developing being a person, an individual, a sovereign being. So it goes over like, understanding connection, the different types of connection, goes over centering, grounding, shielding, which is boundaries, meditation. It goes over trusting your intuition, potentially building these things into or because of a belief system. So all of these things kind of that people need, that I wish I would have had this book to give people, like, Kate, start here. When you're done with this in 6 weeks, because it also has like a 6-week program in it, come back and talk to me, because at that point you will be more centered, you will be more calm, you will be disconnected from other people in terms of, like, if you have a compass and you put magnets around it, the compass needle spins. But if you pull the magnets away, it will point to your true north. So saying no, like you did, keeps your needle compass pointed to the right way. But we tend to, especially if you are super sensitive, your needle's going to be pulled. So that comes out March 29th.
I need this. I'm excited. I'll be there.
Thank you. Yeah, it'll be fun. I'm excited. I think
I'd love to go to that.
I must get your autograph.
Yes, please. Please come. Also, then part of all of this turned into also art. I just released a series of art pieces that are a combination of my photography and my painting. And so it's called Portals, and I brought one for you. This is the one that started it all. And so that is actually an image from Clifton Castle in Ireland.
My gosh. Did you know that I have a lot of Irish and Scottish? That's crazy. Look at this.
Thank you.
That is beautiful.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Can I take
Wow.
So
we need you then at the festival to display some of your pieces.
Yeah, I would love to.
I'd love that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right now, it's a small series.
That's amazing.
Ireland, I think there's a castle from Wales, some churches from back east, and a graveyard also. I'll take piece in that.
Weird.
Yep.
Did a whole presentation on that.
On
too.
Weird, WYRD.
Uh-huh.
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating topic. A whole other 14.
We'll save that
things.
for part 2.
Yes. So there's that, which is out, which you can get those prints at the Conjuring Tree now. And I also have rune sets there, and I make altar skins or divination skins. So they're leather pieces with different symbology from Northern traditions on them. So if you're looking for just an altar piece or something to use as a divination cloth or something, then we have those as well. And those are all there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, do you have certain dates that you're going to be doing readings?
So I usually do readings at the Conjuring Tree the 1st and 3rd Saturdays of the month. In April, I'm going to start doing the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Saturdays of the month. At Another Man's Treasures out in Twilla, I am there like the 1st and 3rd Friday of the month from like 3 to 7. And so those are my kind of times that I'm available to people so they can make appointments and come. I can always just be contacted through runewalker.com and people can contact me that way and then just make an appointment if they want to meet up at a different time than one of those.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Being here. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And very enlightening and endarkening, I must say. Yes. And I think it was weird that we were both here in this time and space together.
Yeah.
So
I love it. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
WYRD, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Look it up. It's very fascinating. We'll talk about that next time.
You got it.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Welcome to Spiricast.